Welcome to this week's Lone Wolves Detroit Lions podcast, made possible thanks to OnSI, a Detroit Lions team channel, made possible thanks to Sports Illustrated. It's a great opportunity to catch up after the 4th of July holiday. We're refreshed. Hopefully, Christian, you got a lot of vitamin D. The weather has been spectacular, even though it's been a very humid start to the summer. It's an interesting opportunity now to take even a closer look at the Detroit Lions as we're only a couple weeks away from training camp. So this episode, we're going to check in with some rankings. Jahmyr Gibbs getting a lot of love from some NFL executives, scouts, coaches. Kind of an interesting look at maybe how John Morton could utilize an emerging running back that could be an MVP candidate this year. The training camp battles. I think now we'll take an introductory look at some of the battles that might be very competitive, maybe some that are not. Who has an opportunity to earn a spot? Maybe you look at some positions that people aren't talking about too much as having depth or having strong competitive battles. We're going to take a look at that. And then Christian's been doing some great work here during the break, looking at the all grit team and the all 21st century team. This is now in 2025, 25 years this century. The Lions have had teams, and it's wild to think about that we've already had to do an all 21st century team. But this week, we're going to take a look at who made the list on Christian's end in regards to the offense. And next week, we'll take a deeper look at the defense. Dan Campbell heading into his 5th year already coaching the Detroit Lions. Just a quick look at who he's done well against, who maybe he hasn't. I know that some of the lists come out and people are quick to respond and to say, well, he got a lot of wins last year against some of those teams. Yes, it's just an introductory factual look because now this year, Dan Campbell is going to have another opportunity with his squad to really showcase what he's about because the level of competition against the AFC is a lot tougher and especially against a tough division. And this morning, Christian, I was crazy enough to wake up 5:30 in the morning without an alarm because I was excited. I've been falling asleep a little bit earlier. Being that it's the break and I'm being a lot more being outdoors a lot more. I'm falling asleep very early. So I got a 5:30 the morning of this recording and I watched straight through almost the entire Netflix docuseries Quarterback. Not going to, give away too much, but I thought there'd be more. I thought that given the encapsulating view a camera crew can get with Jared Goff, maybe I was wrong to be expecting a lot more. I know you haven't seen it all the way through. I've seen every scene that has involved Jared Goff, so we're going to talk about it. What I thought, the highlights, the lowlights. I got my notes here handy. I took notes of every episode, but, if you know Jared Goff's personality, you know he wasn't just going to reveal his deepest, darkest secrets, but thought that maybe do a little bit more deep dive. Who ended up getting a lot of the camera and a guy that I guess is a little more open with his personality is Kirk Cousins. He just comes across as open and he goes through more things than Jared Goff does in this series. So I'll give my review at the end of the podcast. What did the doc think? As I'm probably one of the first to be able to watch it all the way through. But Christian, let's talk. Let's start on a very positive note. We've thought about it. Jahmyr Gibbs is a offensive weapon that you and I think is going to have another breakout year. You started to see what he was able to do when David Montgomery went out. He looked like a number 1 running back. This is a guy that can run through the tackles. He can burst. He's got great explosive speed. And now he's adding and working in the ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. And now with John Morton, I would think that it would behoove him to understand the clear strengths that Jahmyr Gibbs brings to the table, because I think that the ranking that was done by NFL scouts and coaches and those looking at Jahmyr Gibbs now, I do think that his 3rd year is going to be a big one. I do think that he is the 3rd best running back in the National Football League. What'd you make of the rankings? What'd you make of the 2 above them? And, you look at it, and I think you and I are both in the same boat. Jahmyr Gibbs poised to put up some gaudy statistical numbers. I even think 1,000 yards rushing, 1,000 yards receiving, clearly on the table for Jahmyr Gibbs.
100%. And I think that a big reason for why he could cross that 2,000 all-purpose yards plateau is because of the way the Lions use him. And yes, he's a guy who has proven he can go 20, 25 carries and get better as the game goes on, which I think is a trait that all of the best running backs have, right? When you talk about some of the greats to play this game, a common thread between all of them is man, you get into that third, fourth quarter, these guys keep getting better. And I think Jahmyr Gibbs has a lot of that he can do. Obviously, Saquon Barkley, number one right now, coming off of that season. Like, how could you not put Saquon Barkley at the top of the NFL's running backs leaderboard? I do also think that Derrick Henry at 2 is fair. Obviously, he doesn't have the benefit of the youth that Jahmyr Gibbs has going into just his third season. Derrick Henry, 31 years old, maybe past his proverbial prime, but at the same time had a huge impact in Baltimore. I think it was a resurgence for him going to a contender and really getting a chance to shine and compete for a Super Bowl like he did last year. But for Gibbs, a couple of big things for him that I think the Lions can do to maximize his longevity. Number one, do not go away from that balance that they had with him and David Montgomery. David Montgomery may not have the explosive potential that Jahmyr Gibbs has, but David Montgomery is an excellent complement moving forward. Is he the running back one? I don't think so. But he can be a guy that can take 12 to 15 carries off of Gibbs every single game when both of those guys are healthy. And I think that only maximizes Jahmyr Gibbs' long-term potential. Obviously, the running back position making a little bit of a comeback right now. So, 2 years down the line, is Gibbs going to make top dollar money? Right now, it looks like it, right? So I do think that there is a lot to like about Jahmyr Gibbs and what he offers for the Lions in 2025. One more note from that ranking from ESPN. One executive compared him to former Lions running back Reggie Bush. And I think that Gibbs, long-term, can be one of the franchise greats. Is he going to be Barry Sanders? Who knows? Probably not. Barry Sanders is an all-timer, but I wouldn't be surprised if Jahmyr Gibbs continues on this trajectory and stays aligned long-term. He's no doubt going to be one of the franchise's all-timers.
Yeah, you look at it, a lot of praise being heaped on Jahmyr Gibbs, the running back tandem. You realize you got young offensive linemen that maybe will take a few maybe games to gel and to figure things out, but clearly the Lions are going to be a team that run the ball consistently. That's a staple that is going to be taught and, being a point of emphasis all throughout training camp, the importance of a run game for this offense, especially with a new offensive coordinator, new play caller, and, maybe potentially 3/5 of your offensive line being very youthful, under 3 years experience, potentially. But an executive did say also, as much as there was praise, there was concern that, what, if Jahmyr Gibbs does start to receive a bulk more of the carries, how's that going to impact his body? Is he going to wear down? What's your best? We talked about it last year. We were always just in favor of, hey, just use the running backs as much as humanly possible. And many people could argue that if Jahmyr Gibbs was more of a focal point against the Commanders, maybe the result would have been different. Maybe it wasn't, a more of a pass happy kind of situation. And maybe Jahmyr Gibbs should have been utilized and been even more of a focal point in that playoff game. But are you concerned that if he gets more touches, that if you go away from the tandem, I do think they're going to use clearly a tandem. If everybody's healthy with David Montgomery, you're probably going to mix in Craig Reynolds and Sione Vaki at points during the year. It is probably important to consider the health of your running back throughout the year. But do you see potential Derrick Henry workhorse type productivity from Jahmyr Gibbs? Would it behoove the Lions to see a little bit if you up the volume of touches for Jahmyr Gibbs based on his explosive threat, what he can bring to the table? What do you think in terms of how the Lions should best use Gibbs in 2025?
Well, I think the Henry comparison is interesting because they're different players. Obviously, Henry is that big, physical, powerful back, and that's not to say that Jahmyr Gibbs it can't be that way, right? He certainly runs with a lot of power, but I think his defining trait is his speed, not so much his size as a guy like Derrick Henry. And obviously, Henry's a complete back, right? But I think that the way they can continue to, in a way, increase his workload is to get him more involved in the passing game. I think that we heard this coming out last year, I believe, out of training camp, was that they were trying to diversify his route tree and get him to do different things as a pass catcher. And I don't think that we necessarily saw that. It's funny, a funny statistic, he has caught exactly 52 passes in each of his first 2 NFL seasons. No more, no less. 52 passes. It's funny how things like that work out. I'd like to see that number maybe go up a little bit. Can you get into the 65, 70 reception range? And I know that would take a little bit away from St. Brown, Jamo, Laporta, if you get him more involved. Obviously, there's only one ball, but I do think that diversifying Gibbs' ability as a receiver can maybe take away some of those hits he'd take between the tackles. Maybe it's a lower share of the carries where you're going from a guy who can go 25, 30 carries. You're going in that 17 to 20 range with the carries, and then you throw him the ball 6, 7, 8 times a game. I think that to me is the answer, because you're minimizing the bouncing off guys and taking big hits from linebackers, as opposed to getting him out in space and letting him do his thing with his speed. So I think that to me is the biggest thing. Maybe ease up on the workload on carries, which they've already done a pretty good job of. Obviously, having Montgomery helps a ton, and then getting more involved in the passing game, man. Let him work. Get him in open space. Get him on maybe running some crossing routes out of the slot, things of that nature, and just letting him work in space, I think, is the biggest thing.
Yeah, and again, health is going to be key. David Montgomery going down did impact that offense. He did try to come back from that MCL injury, but he wasn't the same against the Commanders, and it had an impact on the whole rhythm of how the Lions played offense. Yeah, they scored points, but there were a lot of mistakes along the way. And so, if you get a healthy Jahmyr Gibbs and an offensive line that gels, I do think that this offense can continue to purr. One of the highest scoring offenses last year in terms of getting field goals and points on a lot of drives, over 50%. And the nearest team was around 37%, I believe, last year. So a great scoring offense. I think it's going to continue, and it's going to be led by the likes of Jahmyr Gibbs, Jameson Williams, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Can't wait to see it. A lot of points being scored. And I think if you can continue to set up the run, John Morton, I don't think is going to abandon it, especially knowing that you don't want to get into shootouts with the teams like the Bengals and the Ravens and the Steelers and the Cowboys. You want to be the one that's dictating play to your opponent. So I do see a lot of usage for Jahmyr Gibbs, and let's see what kind of early snap counts he gets the first maybe quarter to first half of the 2025 season. Now, I'm very curious now, as we turn our attention to training camp. It's ever so close, Christian. It's about to be here. It's coming ever so close. Just a couple more recordings, and training camp will be here. We've started to take a look at some key storylines, narratives, giving the praise to where it's due to the defensive backs, the safeties, and units that are going to be very successful, like the wide receivers and quarterbacks and running backs, like we just talked about with Jahmyr Gibbs. But just looking at roster spots that could be very competitive at different units. I do think that clearly everyone's going to want to watch early the battle between Tate Ratledge and Graham Glasgow, who's going to be the center after Frank Ragnow retired. I'm also curious, too, behind Sam Laporta and Brock Wright, who's going to be that guy. A lot of people are looking at Kenny Yeboah. Does somebody else step up, an undrafted free agent? Does Luke Deal get an opportunity to make some noise and do some things? So we'll see who has opportunities. Clearly, the interior of the defensive line is going to be shuffled around a lot. You clearly understand Tyleik Williams is going to have his role, but behind some reserve roles could produce some battles with Broderick Martin, Roy Lopez, and the likes, Pat O'Connor in the mix. So I'm very curious to see how a lot of the defense also shakes out in reserve spots, like behind, the starters. Where does Ennis Rakestraw fit in? Where does he slot in? Where do guys like Avonte Maddox, where do they start being used? So it's a lot of interesting things to monitor early on in training camp. What are some of the key battles that you think are the most competitive, or maybe ones that maybe people aren't talking about?
Yeah, I think with the Lions, obviously bringing back so much of their starting lineup, especially on the offensive side, it is really about the depth as you go a little bit further down my rankings. And that I think the backup quarterback position battle is always going to be important. Hendon Hooker always going to be tested for that backup spot, and this is really a make or break year for him going into year 3. After this year, he's entering the final year of his rookie deal, and the Lions have a decision. Do you want to keep him as the long-term backup, or do you want to take another chance on somebody else in the draft? And I do think this is a very intriguing quarterback class coming up. And so if Hendon Hooker doesn't do the trick, maybe the Lions would look into this class of 2026 quarterbacks to try and find their next backup behind Jared Goff. Another one, the tight end position. You talk about Shane Zylstra is a guy who came in, won the job mid-season from Parker Hess, and then came in and was that kind of hybrid tight end fullback type of player throughout the rest of the regular season and into the postseason. But they bring in Kenny Yeboah, who is essentially did the same thing for the New York Jets last year. He's a guy worth keeping an eye on as well. And then in my opinion, there's 3 starting jobs that really catch my eye as far as potential position battles. The first one being the defensive end position. Marcus Davenport seems like the far and away lock right now, but let's not forget about a guy like Josh Paschal, a guy like Elquadin Muhammad. Maybe Ahmed Hassanin is in the mix. And then who knows? I mean, there's been all this buzz about Zadarius Smith. Maybe when training camp rolls around, he decides to sign on the dotted line and come back to the Detroit Lions and give it another go. So that's one position May not seem like the most outwardly competitive position battle right now, but I do think there's an opportunity for that to become a heated competition throughout the course of training camp. And then the interior offensive line, the center position, the guard position. The center position was my number one position battle because I think that decides who's even in the competition for that guard spot, be it left or right. Sounds like Christian Mahogany might be the first option on the left side. That's where he played when he got his 2 starting opportunities last year. And then that right guard spot will probably between Miles Frazier and whoever loses out of Graham Glasgow, Tate Ratledge at center. So from my viewpoint, the offensive line, that interior, the position battles work from the top down. Whoever loses out on the center now becomes the top candidate at the right guard position. And then you never know, a guy like Colby Sorsdahl could be in the mix there. A guy like Natane Muti could be in there. Giovanni Manu, they talked a little bit about maybe moving him to guard or at least getting him some reps at guard. So potentially he's the guy that could be in the mix there as well. And so to me, that interior offensive line is really the big one to watch.
Absolutely. And you said it. Backup quarterback going to be key, especially with the Hall of Fame game right around the corner at the end of the month. Right away, we'll get a chance to see how Allen or Hooker look running this offense, especially through the first couple practices of training camp. You want to make sure that the offense is running smooth. That's why many people think that Graham Glasgow is going to be the early on odds-on favorite, because you want to have everything running smooth, the calls and things like that, especially with early practices, but it's yet to be determined. And I'm also curious to see how fast Isaac TeSlaa moves up the depth chart. Does he compete with Tim Patrick? Does he get some opportunities, outside, maybe outside shot to break, wide receiver 4 behind Khalif Raymond? We'll see what his role looks like early on. So a lot of interesting battles that we're going to monitor all throughout training camp, which you can find at Detroit Lions on SI through our podcast, through our daily coverage, insider analysis, as we'll have boots on the ground all throughout training camp, right from day one. It's coming around quickly, so make sure you stay tuned. And thanks everybody who's been subscribing to the YouTube channel, getting our podcast digitally as well. Like and subscribe, hit that notification bell. So every time Christian and I fire it up, or if there's a relevant Detroit Lions topic, we'll fire up the YouTube and you can get all the relevant information quickly. And thank you for the likes and the comments and the interactions. It's been very fun. It's also been very fun to take on fun off-season projects. And a lot of times, in the off-season, we don't want to shut it down because you guys are still so hungry and passionate to consume information. And we greatly are humbled and appreciated. You still listen to the podcast, you still engage and watch the videos and are into the preseason previews and rankings and all the narratives and things like that. We greatly appreciate it. One of the fun projects I knew was coming around the corner was the All 21st Century team. 25 years, 2025. Will be a sentinel year for the Detroit Lions. And so it's a fun project. And Christian was gracious enough to tackle it because I don't want to dig back through history because a lot of it's been painful for me. I'm older than Christian, so I've been through the ups and the downs, all those early years in the 2000s, then the Matt Millen era, the pain of the Stafford era. I'm not even over it. I'm not going to lie. I'm trained to get over things quickly. I'm trained to learn how to get over things quickly. I'm just not over it. So I test Christian with, hey, go back through all those years with Reggie Bush and Ndamukong Suh and Stafford and all the others and just spit out some information. What'd you come up with? And he put together, I thought, an offensive team that's pretty likable. I liked. Now, the defense, you can have a little more arguments maybe, but I'm pretty fond of, and we talked about it a little bit with the Stafford and Goff debate, but just take us through the Detroit Lions' best all 21st century offense. Who made your list? What were some of the toughest decisions you had? And probably one of them was that quarterback because of the success that Jared Goff did have. But tell us about the all 21st century team, the offense that you put together here over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think that when you start this conversation, right, it obviously starts and ends with the quarterback position. And I did have a hard time between Matthew Stafford and Jared Goff. Ultimately, I went with Stafford. He's a record holder in a ton of categories for the Lions in their franchise, both single season and career. And so it's hard for me to overlook that, even with the recency bias of Jared Goff kind of taking that team to new heights. He's done a couple things that Stafford's never done. He's won 2 playoff games. But I think ultimately Stafford kind of defines the last 25 years of Lions football in a way, just with the talent that he had, but also the inability to kind of get over that hump in terms of winning a playoff game. And obviously they had their chances. Maybe if the officials don't pick up the penalty in Dallas, maybe he wins that game and then you look forward from there. But I do think that Stafford is the kind of definitive quarterback at this stage. Obviously, Goff still has plenty in the tank. And I think when we look back at this 5 years down the road, this might be a different conversation if Jared Goff is ultimately able to lead the Lions to that coveted Super Bowl. I think this conversation changes. For running back, I went with Jahmyr Gibbs. He's an obvious one for me, just based on the last 2 years. The running back position was interesting because you've got a lot of guys who have had good 1 year, 2 year spurts. But I think Gibbs is the decision that was pretty easy. I went with James Stewart to go with him. Obviously, Reggie Bush, obviously David Montgomery in recent years. Jamal Williams had a really good 2022 season. You've got a bunch of guys in that mix, but ultimately I thought Stewart had the best 2 year period. Wide receiver, no brainer. Calvin Johnson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, all pros. Calvin's a Hall of Famer. St. Brown, if he picks up on or keeps on this trajectory, probably going to be a Hall of Famer. One of the best day 3 picks in Lions history, in my opinion. Tight end Sam Laporta. Again, a lot of guys who have spurts of production. Brandon Pettigrew, Eric Ebron had a good year. TJ Hawkinson was pretty solid, did get banged up a little bit in his tenure. And then really in 2022, he was kind of looking like this might be his best season yet. They traded him away. So I went with Sam Laporta, again, kind of like Gibbs, good start to the career. Looks like he's on his pace to be huge over the next handful of years. And then the offensive line, the Lions football, obviously the last few years has been defined by the performance of the offensive line. Tough decision to go with Jeff Backus over Taylor Decker, but it's the longevity thing. I mean, he was the mainstay on the left side for the Lions offensive line. On the interior, I went with Rob Sims, Frank Ragnow, Larry Warford. Ragnow, again, that was a tough decision over Dominic Raiola, just because Raiola was that guy for so long in the middle of that Lions offensive line. But I ultimately went with Ragnow. More decorated career, obviously a staple of a team that has really risen. He's part of that old guard, as Dan Campbell described it when they won their first division title in 30 years. And then on the right side, Penei Sewell, no-brainer, 2-time All-Pro already. Again, like St. Brown, going to be a guy that if he continues on this, could be wearing the gold jacket one day.
Yeah, no, it's a fun project to go back and look at some of the records. I know that you ranked some of the teams as well.
Yep.
I thought you did a great job looking back and producing some really interesting content regarding which team was better. Was it the 23 team Lions team, the last year's team that won 15 games? Was it the team that, 2014 that had a chance to win some playoff games? But unfortunately, we didn't get over the hump there in Dallas with Ndamukong Suh and Matthew Stafford, second overall defense. So later on in the century, the team started to kind of pick up the pace a little bit after a disastrous Matt Millen era. So you realize in the mix there, you had the season where the Lions didn't win a single game, which sparked the Matthew Stafford era. And so just that time period before Matthew Stafford wasn't really that great. It kind of started to, wane a little bit for some of the coaching staff there and the talent. And you never really had the quarterback that was going to be the next guy until you had Stafford. And unfortunately, he never got over the hump, but I do think worthy of being the all 21st century quarterback. And so take a look back. Detroit Lions on SI. Make sure you go back and check out each team. In every article, it has links to other competitions as well that Christian kind of thought of and thought of in terms of who made it at the offensive line and tight end and all the other spots too. And also check out the All Grit team. I think that is also well worth your time to see who are the toughest players that made it through. And also too, a feature to tease coming up. Christian will have a lot of great memories from the last 25 years in an upcoming feature that will be featured on Detroit Lions on SI. Now, as we turn our attention to the 2025 season, one of the most important figures outside of Jared Goff is Dan Campbell. And we recognize the team game. We recognize this is a head coach that has really, you started to see his evolution in terms of, hey, it's going to be aggressive. I think clearly the staple, the first and most important goal that an NFL head coach has and needs is to be able to galvanize a locker room. Clearly, that's a staple of Dan Campbell. Just in a recent post we did, showcased in the quarterback series, just how Dan Campbell can rally the troops by giving a message of, hey, this is what we're doing directly. This is what we're going to need to do in order to win football games. And I think it's highlighted in the post-game celebrations. You recognize this is a head coach that understands X's and O's and is an integral part of the game plan every single week. He understands matchups, how to exploit weaknesses and he understands the game of football. You just see how he breaks down the game in a lot of television highlights. So Dan Campbell will be, I think, for the next couple of years in the conversation for Coach of the Year. But just taking a quick look overall in terms of, it's a complete record. It's out there. Who are some of the teams that he's done well against? Who are some of the teams that have, been a challenge? Because you clearly understand the 2 games against the Ravens weren't that great. The Ravens had an opportunity to come to Ford Field, and that Tucker game was wild. And then the game clearly got out of hand in Baltimore. Now another opportunity to go back to Baltimore. I can't wait to see that one now with the offense that Jared Goff now runs along with Dan Campbell. Who are the teams that he's kind of maybe bitten the dust against, and who's some teams that maybe are on the schedule, or who are some teams that you say, okay, if there's an upcoming matchup, the Lions are certainly definitely poised to have a chance to win?
Yeah, I think that when you start the conversation about where Dan Campbell's done well, it has to be with the NFC North division. And when you look at the fact that they started 0-10-1, you wouldn't think that, right? But the way that they finished that 21 season with a win over Minnesota to get your first win, a win over Arizona, and a win over Green Bay. And that was how they started that kind of run that they went on, right? So those 3 teams right there are teams that they've had a lot of success against. The Packers are a team that the Lions, Lambeau Field was a house of horrors for so long. And you remember that, and I remember that, but they struggled going to Lambeau. Dan Campbell's won 3 in a row at Lambeau. They won in 2022, they won in 2023, and then in 2024, they won in Lambeau as well. And 2 of those were primetime games. That 2022 game was the changing of the guard, right? The regular season finale. You knew you were eliminated from the playoffs, and you still went into Lambeau and won. Minnesota's another one. They've won the division the last 2 years with victories over Minnesota. They're 6-2 against both of those teams in Dan Campbell's tenure. And then, they're 5-3 against the Bears, but in 2023, they went to Chicago and looked really, really rough. So I didn't put Chicago on there. I went with Arizona as a team. They've only played out of the division twice, but 2 double-digit wins, a dominant win in 21 when they had a bad team, and they finished 3-13-1. And the Cardinals were coming to Detroit looking to compete for the NFC West division title, and Detroit smacked them. They knocked them right out of the field on their own home turf. So 2 really good wins against Arizona. Those were my 3 teams. When you start the conversation about teams he struggled against, I think Seattle's got to be up there. Seattle's got their number, and I think that the win over them on Monday Night Football this past season was kind of an exorcism in a way. Get all the bad juju out of there, because they had lost to Seattle each of the last 3 years. Dallas is another one. They got the Demons out there with the win in Jerry World last year, but they had lost the previous 2 games. The 2 years ago in 2022, they were really close down on the goal line. The goal line fumble sets off a disastrous end to that game and made the final score look not so indicative of the game itself. And then in 2023, the primetime game, we all know about it, the 2-point conversion that failed. So those are the 2 big ones, in my opinion. And then Baltimore, too. Baltimore, they had the heartbreaking loss in 2021 at home. And then in 2023, they go to Baltimore and get smacked. So those are 3 teams he's done well against, 3 teams he has struggled against.
Yeah, it's going to be key. This is going to be a tough schedule. That's one of the things people are paying attention to that are critiquing the Detroit Lions. They look at that schedule and they say, man, that's one of the toughest schedules on paper that we've seen in quite a while. The AFC North is pretty dominant, pretty strong, and they're always competing against each other. The likes of the Bengals, Steelers, Ravens. That's going to be tough. That's going to be a tough situation to try and overcome. And then the division, one of the toughest division that's getting better. And then you have one of your own coaches go over to lead the Chicago Bears. Everyone's going to be wondering what's going to happen with the Chicago Bears. How fast do they pick up Ben Johnson's offense, and how fast do they make their transition to become a better football team? And then you got the Packers and Vikings, and they both were nipping at the heels of the Lions last year. And so it's going to be tough. So real good look. Make sure you check out in depth Detroit Lions on SI, Christian's daily work, as he continues to put out great informational, factual knowledge and great work here on the podcast as well. All right, last topic here. I'm going to put on the doc is going to put on his Siskel and Ebert cap on. And I feel like I was a little bit critical because I had high expectations. And I think that's how I'm going to preface it, is that when you have these full season productions, you expect a lot. And coming from my perspective, I just basically wanted it to be the Jared Goff show. That's what I wanted it to be. I just wanted to, there was the first 2 episodes, it's great to see, that trailer the information that Jared Goff had about the trade. And we already saw that, but he did kind of really enhance that talk by saying, hey, he just really was wondering why the Rams and Sean McVay and Les Snead weren't mature enough to kind of just tell him, hey, this is what we think, and lay it down with him, give him the facts, and talk to him man to man and say, we're doing this. It just kind of was laid upon him. And that was kind of an interesting nugget. But the first two episodes really focus more on the character development of Kirk Cousins and Joe Burrow, which is fine. You do get a little bit of nuggets about Jared Goff. I thought that, what people are going to like is a little bit of the inside of the touchdown against Seattle on Monday night, the late hands, kind of being able to catch the ball and not have it get knocked away. The game that he had where, he definitely went 18 for 18 was very interesting. You look at it, and I think the first couple episodes are marked by just the city embracing Jared Goff, what that meant to him to get the support of the fans by winning playoff games. And that's nice to see. Like, the fan base really embraced Jared Goff. You get to see the chants, you get to see how he really embraced the idea of, okay, this city kind of took me in and adopted me because I'm kind of similar to all of everybody else. I'm a guy that's been criticized heavily by a lot of blogs and a lot of national media. I'm a guy that's been kind of overlooked at times. And so to see him have some success, have some nice plays against Seattle, and having some great moments where, he's like going 18 for 18 and people are like, whoa, this is nice to see. And so the first couple episodes, you don't get a lot of the personal knowledge stuff. You get a lot of it from Kirk Cousins and Joe Burrow. And you're like, whoa, wait a minute. What's going on here? It starts to pick up in episode 3 and 4, where you get the Dallas beatdown, you get to see Jared Goff's process, watching some film of what he thought about facing Brian Flores. Reminder, too, that Flores was with the Patriots when the Patriots were able to defeat the Rams. You get the chance to see that, hey, when Flores was with Miami, Goff had several turnovers when he was with the Rams. So he definitely saw the motivation that he had to, like, okay, if I don't play well, Brian Flores has in the past embarrassed me. So that's a nice look. You get to see the impact of that ankle roll that he suffered against the Titans, where his family's taking a look at it, the work that he did, and the toughness. I think that's probably going to be the marquee highlight of a lot of people's reaction, is that he comes off as tough. Like, he's like, if I can go do my job, I'm going to be out there. Similar to Matthew Stafford, that it's highlighted how tough he is in terms of working with his trainer and realizing that, hey, he's always going to say, I'm 100%. I feel good. He's not going to let the, defense or defenders that rock him really give him anything. And I think that's really an endearing quality in a quarterback. You're going to get hit. You got to showcase that you're a tough individual, that you're going to be out there. So I thought that was really, really a highlight of episode 3 and 4, is just kind of starting to get to know Jared Goff. The next episode 5 is really good because you get to see a little bit of the behind the scenes of Stumblebum against the Bears. That was a great play to see how it kind of started to work out in practice. And you do get a little glimpse of practice, like, okay, here's how the Lions kind of set up some plays that are going to work. So it's definitely hey, we did some great things in practice that end up showing in games. So that definitely highlighted the strength. Episode 6 was kind of the media story, where how do these quarterbacks deal with a lot of the noise? Jared Goff reiterated, I don't care about the outside narratives. I don't deal with all that. You see him fishing out there near his home or near a lake by his home or so. And so you just kind of get a sense in the 6th episode how the quarterbacks deal with being like the CEO of the whole offense, kind of having the whole world talk about you and stuff like that. And for Jared Goff, it's just kind of, hey, I can't play in the cold. Watch how I did against the Bears. He definitely took a dig at those that said to him, I can't play in the cold. It's like, I've only played in a handful, and I thought I did okay. But the Ben Johnson makes it a point that when he's mic'd up to say, I thought you couldn't throw in the cold, Jared, after he launched that 70-yard touchdown to Jamison Williams. So he definitely made it a point to take jabs back, which is good. I thought that was great. You do see, I think the critique is this is too much Kristen Harper. I mean, look, I know it's his wife. I know that's his sole, probably family member that's in town, but just far too much. I mean, it's just a lot of her opinions on things, and she knows football, but doesn't know it in depthly. I think you could have just saved her for episode 7, where she reacts to the playoff loss. I thought that, she featured a little bit too much. I get why, as somebody that supports him, and you get some little bit of a background, but I just felt like I would have wanted, in my opinion, more of Jared Goff with his teammates, more with Ben Johnson, more with Dan Campbell, more. And so for us, like you and I, you're going to watch it and you're going to be like, okay, this is good, but you know it all. You read it. You have been in it. You've written about some of these things. So it's not going to be terribly enlightening for guys like you. And I don't want to like spoil, you watching it, but I just feel like someone like yourself, Christian, is going to see that and go, yeah, I knew that. Oh, okay. It's just going to add layers of nuggets of information, but not a lot of deep personal, things outside comparatively to the other two. Kirk Cousins is open, like going after games to a restaurant and his thoughts about losing his job and basically after games, Kirk Cousins would be driving home, would get on the phone and have voice notes just being like, I'm not playing good. I just feel like we got to do this, that. He's just so into it that you got a lot more of that insider stuff comparatively to Jared Goff, where it's kind of like how he is with the media and how he's been just kind of buttoned up and kind of like, this is what I want to portray, which is fine. But I just felt like you could have given more time to his desire to win the Super Bowl, more time to his you have a little bit of a glimpse that, okay, he hangs out with Amon-Ra St. Brown, but does he talk to his linemen? You get like 4 seconds of interaction with his offensive line, whereas Joe Burrow, I think, has more people over. You have more scenes that are family oriented, more oriented with the team. Jared Goff, it's a lot of Kristen Harper. I just wish you would have seen him with Dan Skipper and the offensive linemen and Dan Campbell. Like, you would have seen more of a dynamic. Like, if you have a whole year access, it just felt like maybe a lot of good stuff ended up on the cutting room floor. But to end, episode 7 is tough. If you want to just get to the Lions stuff, skip through the first 40 minutes of episode 7. It's a lot of Kirk Cousins and Joe Burrow's quest to get to the postseason and Kirk Cousins losing his job. But you get to the Commanders game, it's tough. You relive the moments where Jared Goff's going, no, no, no. When Jameson has the interception, you get Kristen Harper's reaction like, I can't believe this game's kind of close. We're supposed to be like a lot of before the game during the bye week, there was talk of, I'm excited to see the next couple weeks happen. It's a excited look at the postseason because there was a lot of hope with Jared Goff's family. And then knowing that they're going to lose, it was just horrible. You get Kristen Harper basically stunned and not knowing how to react like a fan would. You get Graham Glasgow walking in the tunnel, just stunningly heartbroken and just saying he's sorry. You get Jared Goff just understanding that, man, I was a big part of this loss. If I had done better, you get to see a little bit of that on the football side of like just how tough it is to deal with a goal that you had that you didn't make. The throw that he had where he could have thrown it to Laporta, but I think he overthrew it. That's the throw that he highlighted as being one in the game against the Commanders. One of the early interceptions that he felt, man, was probably the start of the negative turn in that game. So good series. I give it a B. Worth your time. But if you don't need to binge watch it, I think if you're just a regular fan that's just now taking a look at it, you can watch it over a couple days, 2 episodes here. You can skip the first 2, start with episode 3. It's when it gets really good. 3 and 4 highlight Goff a lot more. And I just feel like for an encapsulating year-long look at a quarterback, it's similar to receiver. I thought maybe the receiver one and the first quarterback one's a little bit better. But Jared Goff comes off like I probably had high expectations. I thought he'd come off as a superstar. I think he's going to come off as being a classy, well-respected pro. That is somebody capable of leading an NFL team, somebody you would like to have. But I just, again, walk away going, can this guy be the guy that leads the Detroit Lions to a Super Bowl? And it's okay. I support the Detroit Lions. It's pretty clear. I'm from Detroit. You're from Detroit. But I just have question marks. You just have question marks because of how difficult it is to end up being the last quarterback standing. There's only one a year that gets to be happy. And hopefully one day it's Jared Goff, but I have doubts that with how tough it is with the level of talent that the other it's also a respect level for the other 31 quarterbacks. It's a tough thing. And some of the high-end ones like Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, and now the growing ones like Caleb Williams and Michael Penix, they're getting better. And Justin Herbert, they're getting better every single year and more athletic and more talented. And teams are figuring out more ways to get it done. So I have that question mark. I hope he proves us wrong. I hopefully one day he gets to stand there and hoist the Lombardi Trophy with Dan Campbell and the entire Detroit Lions organization. But I just felt like more. I don't know if I'm being too critical. I can't wait to talk to you after you watch it all. But that's my review. It was a good, morning thing to do. on an average Tuesday morning. You just get after it, watch it. It's a little bit crazy to get up that early to watch it, but I bring it to you guys because, listen, spoiler alert, I love Detroit Lions content. I love covering the team, passionate about it, and I wanted to at least give you a little snippet of what it's like to watch something along with myself as I'm watching it live. So thanks, everybody. It's a great opportunity again to fire it up with Christian. Everybody has been reading your work, Christian, at a high level, reading our opinions. Vito as well. Great work by Emmett by doing a lot of the previews and some special features. So great work by Detroit Lions on SI. I can't wait to bring you now since 2019, 19, 20, 22, 23, our 7th full-time year round covering the Detroit Lions, and now mixing in more podcasts to give our analysis and videos. It's great to be in the digital landscape, to be in the mix, and to have Pat McAfee's producer react to one of the great Dan Campbell speeches. So go check it out. The hub of the operation at Detroit Podcast on Twitter X. Visit us, si.com/NFL/Lions. Or if you're on Google, just type in the 3 words Detroit Lions on SI, and you'll find us. YouTube on SI Detroit Lions. You can find us pretty quickly and get all the insider analysis, our opinions, highlights, videos discussing all things and our special projects. So, Christian, great work. I can't wait to talk to you again probably next week as we get deeper and dive deeper into what we're going to see at training camp, what we want to see, and some great previews coming up ahead. Christian, great work. Let's talk again next week on the latest episode. Can't wait to fire it up. The next week's episode of the Detroit Lions Lone Wolves podcast.